Kia ora koutou katoa. E ngā mana i ngā reo aha koa he iti taku Pounamu. I mihi to the wonderful talent gathered here today, the experienced practitioners, our kaumātua kuia, our leaders of Te Ao Māori in Freshwater. It's a huge gathering, it's a huge opportunity for us as Māori to come together in a kaupapa Māori space and have a look at ourselves and each other and our duties to our tuakana species, our taonga species. And so as a haukainga, as a reo whangare, wanting to present a worldview that informs me at this time of my contribution towards those duties. And look to the future in terms of our relationships. So I'll get into that worldview thing first. I also want to mihi too the presentations so far. There's a lot to take home from this conference, and a lot of information and lessons learnt from other people's experience. And I really, really mihi to the contributions to this conference so far. We're looking at relationships. And the title for this kōrero was on relationships for the future of our taonga species. Or for the future resilience of our taonga species. But when we're talking about relationships for action, for us to give effect to our duties as hapu, as mana whenua, the same rules apply in every space. We need relationships to pursue our health priorities, our environmental priorities. We need relationships all over and so on. And they're heavily informed by te tiriti for us here, especially in the north, he whakaputanga, which I'll talk to a bit later. But yeah, it's really important that we get these relationships right. So we are truly, as as sovereign people, as hapu, having a meeting of minds with the Crown as we address these things. And in doing that, we can bring our worldview, we can bring our mātauranga, and have a space where, as Te Kairi Nui was talking about yesterday, dual heritage, but what does the shared future look like? We're still working that out, as a nation. And so this is a contribution towards the progression of that. And so here I am, uri o te parawhau, tēnei whenua, te rohe mana o te parawhau. But also, our whakapapa is intertwined. And we have, just on the other side of the awa, Ngāti Kahu o Torongare. Further down the awa, we have our te Patu Harakeke. We have Ngāti Wai, we have Ngāti Hau. We have this dynamic landscape that's wrapped around these taonga, and it's imbued with whakapapa. And I wanted to share the way I engage with these things is, I wanted to share that perspective of, as a kaimahi, wanting to engage as an integral part of my ethics and my morals, I'm not going to rush off, and so we heard kōrero a few yesterday about, if there's someone who has the skills and expertise to deliver as well as the whakapapa, then they are the person for the job. We heard from Jade yesterday. However, if there isn't that person there, she was willing to mentor or, engage in things like that. And so we have to constantly navigate as we move through our work. And the structures out there don't recognise mana i te whenua. And we need to progress on that, in the recognition of that. So I'll start with the boring text version of the worldview. We have education that drives us and informs us. We have work that we've done in the past, so I've got a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Earth Science, and did research in ecological genetics. I have worked in environmental education and restoration projects to do with freshwater and marine environments through these programs and an NGO. But then I was very aware that I wasn't able to work confidently in Te Ao Māori, and so kind of took a massive jump from a lovely educational positive space into the world of our claimants and those who are at the front line of progressing these things which matter so much to all of us in our practice. And so I worked as a coordinator for our claimants of whāngarei for 2 to 3 years, but now that I have all the knowledge of what's going on in that space, I think that's the mahi that I'll be in for a long more time to come. Yeah, now I've learned. With knowledge comes duty. Yeah. And so now live as a kaimahi general projects person. I'm not constrained by any one title, one job description, which I suspect is the case for many of us. We're a holistic people, and our worldview is holistic, and so we do the mahi for paid or for not, whenever we can. Yeah. But yeah, more pointing to who I am as a person and that worldview that informs it is, being a person of this whenua, of this place, I've got, a short lifetime worth of accumulating knowledge about this place. And not only my knowledge, but that of the people before me. And so this is my father, and he was continuing a long tradition of living off these taonga species, We had as people, we were dependent on our fisheries, these resources for our sustenance and for our survival. And in a short time, from, his youth to my time, that got flipped on its head. Our taonga species are relying on us for their survival. And, so this photo here is a really, you can probably read a lot into that. And that we have been part of that change. We've been part of that flip in terms of pushing these resources to their limits. Yeah. But that was our relationship. There were, even in my childhood, there were football field sizes of schools of Trevally in Whangarei Te Rangaparawa, and you don't see that anymore. My uncle used to catch hapuka under the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Hapuka. Big, amazing, locally extinct. Locally extinct, they now call it. It is now a deep sea fishery. But that's our shifting baseline that we are confronted with. We go to uni and we learn these things. I receive this type of information from an ecologist perspective. And then I come home and learn from our people, and it's just the same story. We've lost so much. And it's mind-blowing. And so the worldview which we have is definitely whakapapa. It is definitely mātauranga Māori, but it's also our lived experience in the last 3 generations. Our resilience over the last 3 generations is amazing. It's that story alone, and how we've adapted and upheld priorities through the impacts of the last 100 and so years is pretty an amazing resilient story. And so if we're looking into the future, climate change being another layer to that impact, I think we've got the tools. I think we have the tools because we've made it this far to be resilient to that. further worldview. And so, and again, giving our manuhiri some local knowledge to go home with, an example of resilience. We have whangarei te ringa parawa, he taonga nui. And we also have the one and only oil refinery in New Zealand, which is built on Popo Whenua, being a place, a place of prime significance to the tribes of the harbour. It's the waharawa of the harbour. And everything involved in that, it's the mātauranga and the whakapapa of that area, but also, the taniwha stories, the waka stories, and there's so much in that spot right there, which is of prime significance to us, and it's covered in this severely toxic site. But it's not only the whenua, which is very vulnerable to climate change, tsunami and other hazards. It's the harbour, it's the water. And so as an example of our worldview not quite meshing with our regulatory and our relationship frameworks with the Crown is our recent experience of coming together as hapu around addressing the resource consent application to dredge over 3 million cubic metres of the entrance to the harbour, the pipi beds, the everything, and so they can get bigger loads into this refinery. An economic driver, we understand this. A petroleum industry-based activity. In this room alone, there are many who contributed really heavily towards this issue. We submitted from all perspectives as hapu. And so while my voice was just from one whenua block here in the harbour, I managed, was able to witness the many whakaaro from our hapu of whangarei on this thing, and it was really holistic. Of course it was. And one of the contributions was that this is a space and place of significance for taniwha. And then to have the commissioners come back and say, it's inconclusive whether there's a taniwha. And there wasn't enough evidence presented. And so we have, we're confronted with this, and this is just one story which I'm sure many are familiar with in their own experience and in their own whawhai with their Crown relationships to protect our taonga. And so I'm a great fan of Tina Ngātai and her Facebook and everything and her blogs and so like Tina, I am becoming perhaps more and more radicalised in my worldview. And she gave a description recently in that this, within the Tuia 250 kōrero, but to bring it over to this one, is that, this is a form of cultural gaslighting. It's playing down our lived experience, so it makes us feel a bit crazy. It makes us feel, and so this is my voice now, it undermines that, our taniwha was, and I feel mamae and aroha for my kids who are also going to have to enter into that space. I want to teach them about the taniwha, but I also don't want them to come into a position where they have to have the same issue and have their, taha wairua downplayed. Yeah. So another worldview perspective. So where I'm standing, I can't quite see it, but if everyone turns around and looks out the window, this is Whangarei CBD we're looking at. And behind us we can see, tuka. We can see our pā sites of old. Our tupuna had pā sites. We have Parihaka, there's Kawika pā, there's a few other pā to the north there, and I think even that way we can see a few. Waimahanga, yeah. And so, we've got a lovely view here. And this hill just behind us, again, was a strategic point on the harbour. You've got a good view of all these pā sites around. But, we had these tuka up on these hills. And one whakaaro I've heard about that is that was because down by the sea is a hazardous space. It's hazardous. It's not only to do with, needing a good view for who's coming up the harbour, but it's also because of natural hazards including sea level change. Patu Hohepa submitted in Te Paparahi o Te Raki in that at the time of the arrival of the waka in the Hokianga, sea level was a very different place, and that our places of significance up there, while they're tauranga waka, historical tauranga waka, they are, they're not at sea level, they're actually up. Yeah. And so we hold those narratives, they're not well articulate or well said, we don't hear it often, but we've been resilient to environmental change for a long time, since we were here. And so here in Whangarei, we're looking at the CBD of the future. I work a little bit alongside the cousin Jade, who presented yesterday on the Mātātoa Rōpū. And in her design work, she's integrating our hapu voice. And so we had a few workshops, and it was really cool in terms of facilitating our hapu voice and our aspirations and our taonga of the CBD into a design. And it was an integrative, holistic process, of course, because we did it in a kaupapa Māori way. We did it at marae. We did it, in Māori spaces. We invited the council in, present your thing. But no, then you go out and we talk amongst ourselves. And that information is really valuable. This is just a skim. There's so much more. This is so much more. The budget was like this for a job that's like that, which, again, we have to do often. But anyhow, the pā sites we recognised. But so also was the fact that our tauranga waka are often at the places of inanga spawning. They're at the upper limit of the tidal range. They're places of action in fish, So we have, a Hihiawa Fishing Reserve, which is just a stone's throw this way. And that's at that interchange of saltwater and freshwater. And it's an active spot, It's a place to fish, to capture, to catch fish. There's tuna. There's a variety of species there historically. Whereas today, the sediments in the upper harbour are so heavily loaded with heavy metals that you wouldn't want to eat that fish regularly. It's still below health standards, but if you were living off that as your primary source of kai, you could be accumulating some nasty mercury and lead. And so we retreat from these spaces, and those practices, and they're resigned to an interpretation border, a sign on the side of the awa that talks about the times of the past. And here in the CBD master plan process, we also pointed out the vision of connecting people with our taiao. And we look to the kōrero of the past as well, these are whakatauki now that the sky would turn black from the kukupa and the kaka flying this time of year, springtime, flocking. And that they were so, the number of kukupa were so many that they would break the trees, and all around the place. Here in Whangarei, and now that's just so hard to imagine. What else is there? And that, the inanga spawning event. And so, I would love to do more research into that, because our knowledge here around these fisheries is unique. It's really different from the Hokianga or the Bay of Islands or the Waikato or further afield. And that local knowledge, really needs to come out if we're to actually make local change in our areas. And I'm just really aware that that research hasn't happened yet in a way that we can articulate or share it with others. Yeah. So, you know, there was talk around hearing and seeing, not this awa, but another spot further up, hearing and seeing the inanga and their spawning in the way that you could hear it you could hear the waters thrashing from 100 metres away. And the water would turn milky, you know, it would turn the colour, like you poured bottles of milk in the awa, and that was the spawning event. And again, you know, because I've done inanga spawning work with the Whiteback Connection in the past, and sat on riversides in autumn mornings, and, you know, just to witness these things. And I can't imagine it being that vigorous, you know, yeah, that you can hear it from 100 metres away. That would be cool. But that's the abundance as well that we're just not seeing. And over in the rohe, in the catchment that Dale was talking about yesterday as well, there was talk of, in times of tuna whakaheke, which are also times of flooding, you know, because that's when they migrate out to sea, they follow that freshwater rush out to sea. And that at those times in the past, the volume of tuna out-measured the volume of water. And that actually the mound of tuna making their way out to sea was, again, something you could hear from a way away, and you could go down and see the slug of them heading out. And yeah, again, very hard to imagine in today's world. And yet, our catchment is one of the most productive, you know, fastest growing, fattest, in my colloquialisms, tuna that I think has ever been recorded, you know, through the long research that's been going on through Jacques and Erica with Phoenicia and our people of Korokota and ngā kautiaki o ngā Waimari. And so it's just, you know, we're continuing to have our minds blown by these research partnerships. It's really cool. All right, so back to worldview and getting back onto subject around the way forward. Time and the claims, it makes sense that, you know, we are looking to our tupuna's intent when they sign Te Tiriti. And for us, a large part of Te Paparahi o Te Raki was hinging on our understanding of our tupuna intent when they engaged in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And there was an inquiry into it by the Waitangi Tribunal in that pre-Te Tiriti time. And their finding was that those rangatira who signed in these northland places, they did not cede sovereignty. And what largely informed that was that they already had their constitution. They already had a constitution as rangatira, as chiefs of hapu, and that was He Whakaputanga. Yeah, so they'd already enacted and, you know, constituted themselves as a people, and for those areas. And so Te Tiriti was a meeting of minds. It was a meeting of minds from sovereign to sovereign. In our part, there were many signatories in the north, and each one of them had their own sovereignty that they came together on to meet and have a meeting of minds with the Crown, and it came out as, you know, Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so if we to wind back to that and look at that intent and how that has been undermined ever since, it leads to a few kind of logical conclusions, you know, just as an overview and a logical glance. And so I've done. Sorry, I was pointing to as well that for us here in Whangarei, the work that we're doing is to really check that out and check ourselves out as to how we should be proceeding. If that was our tupuna intent, you know, how do we need to go forward? And to come together, you know, the worldview must be tribal. It must be kaupapa Māori. It must be us meeting naturally in our own spaces, so we can use, through our tikanga, address these issues and challenges, which are shared challenges, but by sitting at a table, at a co-governance table, do we have the same voice? Do we have the same ability to engage in the issues, as if we were to be in our kaupapa-driven space that was mātauranga driven, and there's a lot of work to be done to really build that, and we acknowledge that here in Whangarei. But it has to be done authentically and with hapu consent and whānau consent and with the taumata to guide us. And so, that structure, we're still developing and working on what today's iteration of our tūpuna intent from between signatories to He Whakaputanga and engaging with the Crown and Te Tiriti. And so I've done a crude analysis of some of our relationships as hapu here in the north. We're very hapu driven. It's a defining feature of Ngāpuhi in that hapu hold rangatiratanga. And that's seen today. It's really clear. There's clear pushbacks as well, which I'm sure everyone sees on that national stage. But to me, as a young person coming through, I think that continuing to push these boundaries is critical, because we have to get back to this somehow. We have to get back to that intent between signatories to He Whakaputanga and that relationship with the Crown. And so I just kind of jotted down, if we were to conduct an audit on some of these relationships we have with the Crown now, which, just listing some which relate to taonga freshwater species, which ones are compliant, which ones fit, which ones fit these three columns of He Whakaputanga Te Tiriti, and then I added in tikanga Māori for good measure, as if it wasn't already obvious enough in He Whakaputanga me Te Tiriti. And I left it blank because I'm not going to be audacious enough to judge on your behalf how it's working in your areas, and also not to undermine the work that is being done on a daily basis in these frameworks and in these and the gains that are being made in those spaces as well. But if we are to kind of look to, perhaps by the end of my time in my duties as a hapu kaimahi, can we get closer to that tūpuna intent with He Whakaputanga? And so if it isn't obvious enough, in my view there, all of these are not meeting the mark. I won't be audacious enough to say the legal personhood isn't, because I haven't done any time in terms of researching that, and we have far more talented, authoritative kai kōrero to that in the room. But those other ones I can point to in our experience here in Whangarei are still quite a way off. And so that's me. I'm also going to sign off with a little theme, I suppose, in that when we get into our workshops just now, let's utilise this is a hui Māori. We're here as Māori, as hapu kaimahi, as kaumātua, as taumata. Let's use this opportunity to give effect to our Māori voice with regards to our taonga species. We've only got an hour though, so we'll see. And I know usually the tikanga that we practice in our hui is that they're a lot longer than an hour to get to some agreement with a group of this size too. So kia kaha whānau mā. I promote, I'd like to continue to advocate for moving towards meeting of minds with the Crown on all matters. But I think that for the future, that'll give us great opportunity to add value to our shared issues such as climate change and so on, is that if we come from that space. Kia ora.